It's July 2nd, 1982, Long Beach Airport, California. Air traffic controller Dave Wrench is settling into what he expects to be a routine afternoon shift. The control tower stands high above the busy airport. Planes take off and land as hot coffee steams up the monitors. Suddenly, high-pitched alarms drown out the static from the radio. He wipes the steam off his monitor. This is impossible. His headset crackles. Beach Tower, this is TWA 231. We have a man in a lawn chair at our altitude. He appears to have balloons attached to his chair. Wrench leans forward, staring at the radar screen. TWA, please repeat. The pilot's voice now sounded more frantic. There's a guy up here with balloons tied to a lawn chair. He squints at the screen as he gets a visual. Say again, TWA 231. His own voice sounds strange to him. Did you say lawn chair? Affirmative, male occupant, waving at us. Multiple balloons. This is not a drill. Let me tell you about Larry Walters, a 33-year-old truck driver who, on his summer day in 1982, achieved something the Wright brothers would only dream of. He flew not in an airplane or an helicopter, but in an aluminum lawn chair tied to weather balloons. It sounds like a Disney story, but it's not. This actually happened. This is a story of how an ordinary man launched himself into aviation history. It reveals something profound about the human need to soar, whatever the cost. Let me take you back to where it all began, Carol's backyard in San Pedro, California. A modest suburban home with a small yard, the kind of place where working-class families barbecue on weekends and kids play in the streets. But Carol's backyard looks a bit different today. 42 weather balloons bob against their restraints. Each one spans 4 feet in diameter. They're tied to an ordinary aluminum lawn chair, the kind you might find at Sears. Robust but simple. Definitely not designed for flight. Larry stands next to it. His heart pounds with anticipation and fear. He's been planning this for weeks, thinking through every detail. Well, most details, I should say. He's wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and tennis shoes. Not exactly a standard aviation uniform. Strapped to his back is Larry's only lifeline, his only safety feature. At the Army Plus, where they bought the weather balloons, Carol saw a parachute. She paid for it and insisted that Larry would wear it. The rest of his flight gear is a CB radio, a camera, some snacks, a bottle of Coke, and an altitude gauge. And last but not least, a pellet gun. His plan for coming down is to shoot the balloons one by one until he descends gently back to Earth. The morning air feels cold against his skin. Somewhere in the distance, he hears traffic on the freeway. Ordinary sounds of people going about their ordinary lives. But for Larry, life will never be ordinary again. Carol watches from the back porch. She nibbles on her bottom lip in angst. She's been against this idea from the beginning, but she knows Larry well enough to understand that once he commits to something, nothing will change his mind.
Larry, please. Just think about this one more time. You could get hurt. You could fly out to sea.
He turns to look back at her. She can see the determination in his eyes mixed with something else. Is it fear? Maybe it's excitement. They've been together for 10 years, and she's never seen him this focused on anything. Larry has been fascinated by flight for as long as he can remember. As a child, he would lie in the backyard watching planes fly across the blue California sky. He applied to the Air Force when he turned 18, dreaming of becoming a pilot, but they rejected him. Poor vision, they said. Suck it up, Larry, you're not going to be a pilot. So he became a truck driver instead, spending his days on highways, his eyes always drifting upward whenever a plane passed overhead. The dream never really faded. It just lingered. Now at 33, a dream has taken shape in Carol's backyard. He calculated the lift capacity of each balloon. He added the weight of the chair and his own body. He figured he'd rise maybe a few hundred feet, catch a drift to the Mojave Desert, then shoot a few balloons and land safely. But somewhere, surprise, surprise, his calculations were a bit off. Carol and his neighbor Mark help him with the final preparations. They've pinned the chair to the ground with anchors as they fill the balloons with helium. A 100-foot tether is fixed to the bumper of a car. The plan is to pull the anchors and then gently float up. The 100-foot line will hold him. Then, when ready, Larry will cut himself loose. Carol then goes in and informs the authorities. It's a solid plan. You sure about this, Larry? Mark runs through a mental checklist of everything that could go wrong. What if the wind picks up? What if you drift over the ocean? Larry turns the dial on the CB radio on his lap, testing the frequency one more time.
Mark, I've got this. I'll stay in radio contact. If anything goes wrong, I'll just shoot a few balloons and float down. Easy as that.
He's trying to sound confident, but his hands are sweaty as he holds on for dear life. The moment arrives, Larry sits in his lawn chair, feeling the balloons tugging upwards with surprising force. The whole contraption strains against the anchors. Okay, he calls to Mark, cut me loose. Mark hesitates for just a second. This feels like one of those moments that seemed a good idea at the time. But Larry nods at him to do it, so Mark pulls the anchors. What happens next defies every calculation Larry made at the kitchen table. The chair doesn't rise gently to 100 feet. It rockets upward like a missile, snapping the 100-foot tether, jerking the lawn chair violently. To the CB, he yells to Carol that he's dropped his glasses. He climbs so fast, his ears pop. In seconds, the neighborhood becomes a miniature model below him. In minutes, he can see the entire city of Los Angeles spread out like a map. Fear floods his body, followed by wonder. He's actually flying. The sensation is everything he imagined and nothing like he prepared for. Oh my God, he whispers to himself, watching the ground fall away at an alarming rate. His hands shake as he reaches for the CB radio. This is Larry, he calls out to the emergency frequency. I'm in the lawn chair with balloons and I'm going up fast, really fast. CB stays silent. He's already too high to get a signal. Below, Carol runs into the house to call the police. She's watching her boyfriend disappear into the sky. Panic consumes her as she dials 911. Larry convinced her that this was going to be a short flight with a safe landing in the desert. Instead, Larry's climbing to an altitude where planes fly. He has no way to communicate and no real plan to stop the ascent. At 8,000 feet, he levels off briefly. The view is breathtaking. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly to the west. He sees mountains in the east, and the city of Los Angeles fills the valley below. He's never seen anything like it, but the balloons aren't done. After a few minutes of relative stability, they catch a thermal and resume their climb. He checks the meter, 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet, 14,000 feet. Larry's now flying higher than most people ever travel, except for in a commercial airplane. But he's sitting in a lawn chair, wearing ordinary clothing and breathing air that's getting thinner by the minute. This was not the plan, he thinks to himself, trying to control his panic. This is definitely not the plan. He reaches for his pellet gun, thinking he'll shoot a few balloons to slow the ascent. But as he looks up at the cluster of balloons keeping him afloat, a terrifying thought hits him. If he shoots too many balloons, he'll plummet to Earth like a rock. If he shoots too few, he might keep climbing until he passes out from lack of oxygen or hypothermia. He has no way to know exactly how many balloons he should pop. He's trapped in a lawn chair 3 miles above the ground with no good options. Down at Long Beach Airport, David Wrench is coordinating with emergency services. The Coast Guard has been notified and police helicopters are trying to locate the mysterious flying man. The FAA is scrambling to understand how someone launched a bunch of balloons into commercial airspace. This is insane, Wrench yells to his supervisor. We've got a guy in the lawn chair flying around at 16,000 feet and nobody knows how to get there or how to get him down. Larry is indeed cold, scared, and running out of options. He's been airborne for 30 minutes, drifting southeast over Orange County. The wind is pushing him toward the mountains, and he knows that if he doesn't figure out how to descend soon, he'll either freeze to death or crash into a peak. Finally, he makes the only decision he's left with. Carefully, precisely, aims the pellet gun at the balloons above and starts shooting. Pop! One balloon deflates and falls away. He waits, feeling for any change in his rate of climb. Still going up. Pop! Another balloon. Now he's maintaining altitude, but the wind is still carrying him toward the mountains. Pop up! Finally, he begins to descend. As he falls, he can see the power lines below him stretching across the neighborhood like a deadly web. There's no way to steer clear. The balloons carry him wherever the wind decides. A few minutes later, Larry Walters crashes directly into a power line in Long Beach. The aluminum chair makes contact with the electrical cables and the neighborhood plunges into darkness. A 20-minute blackout caused by a man in a lawn chair. Larry dangles about a dozen feet above the ground, still strapped to his chair, balloons tugging upward against the power lines. For a terrifying moment, he thinks this might be how his adventure ends. But a neighbor comes to the rescue, and against all odds, he turns out to be an airline pilot on his day off. "Hey, do you need any help?" the pilot calls out, stating the obvious. The city has to shut down the power to the entire neighborhood to safely rescue Larry. The pilot helps Larry down onto a stepladder, finally allowing him to cut himself free and touch solid ground for the first time in nearly an hour. His legs shake as he realizes how close he came to death. Emergency crews arrive to find Larry and the neighbor looking up at the balloon still caught in the cables above. "Are you okay?" says the neighbor. "What happened?" Larry looks up at the sky and then back at his savior. "I flew here," he says simply, "in a lawn chair." Within minutes, police cars and emergency vehicles arrive. Then news trucks, then helicopters carrying TV crews. Larry Walters has inadvertently become the center of a media circus. As he's checked by the paramedics, who find him remarkably unharmed despite his 3-mile-high adventure, reporters shove their microphones in his face.
A man flew from his backyard in San Pedro. He tied 43 weather balloons to a lawn chair he purchased at Sears. He soared to 16,000 feet and flew for 45 minutes before he crashed into power lines. A neighbor, an airline pilot on his day off, says he saw it all happen.
"I was sitting by the pool. I look up and I see a guy floating in the air tied to a bunch of balloons. He's falling fast, so I ran out there to help."
Our reporter on site spoke with balloon pilot Larry Walters.
We are standing here at the site where Larry Walters flew in a lawn chair attached to weather balloons and crashed into high-voltage lines. We asked Larry why he did it.
"I've been thinking about this my whole life. Ever since I was a little kid, looking up at the sky. I just wanted to know what it feels like up there. I have absolutely no regrets."
Despite everything that went wrong, despite how close he came to a disaster, he experienced something most people never will. But the adventure has consequences. The Federal Aviation Administration doesn't find Larry's story beautiful or inspiring. They find it illegal and dangerous. Within days, FAA investigators arrive at Larry's home in San Pedro. They're not interested in his childhood dreams or his sense of wonder. They want to understand how a civilian launched 42 weather balloons into controlled airspace, how he put them in the path of commercial flights while triggering emergency responses from multiple agencies. Larry sits at his kitchen table, same table where he planned his balloon flight, now facing potential federal charges. The lead investigator shows Larry the file. He explains that Larry violated numerous regulations. He operated an aircraft without a license and flew in controlled airspace without permission. Larry feels the weight of the government settling over his adventure like a wet blanket. The magic of his flight is being reduced to violation codes and penalties. The investigators tried every angle, but regulations said nothing about a guy strapped to a lawn chair lifted by weather balloons. They could only fine him $4,000 for violating controlled airspace and operating an unlicensed aircraft. Later, it reduced to $1,500, but the legal consequences are nothing compared to what happens next. Overnight, he becomes famous, not just locally, but internationally. The story of Lawn Chair Larry spreads around the world. He appears on talk shows, receives offers for movie deals, and gets invited to speak at events. For a truck driver from San Pedro, the attention is overwhelming. Larry finds himself in a spotlight that he never asked for, trying to explain over and over why he risked his life to sit in a lawn chair 3 miles high. "I just wanted to fly," he tells Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. He's more anxious here than he was tied to the balloons. The audience laughs and applauds, treating his story like entertainment, but Larry can see that they don't really understand. They think it's funny, the crazy guy who tied balloons to a chair. They miss the deeper current running through the story, a lifelong dream that finally demanded action, regardless of consequences. Fame proves harder to navigate than flight. Larry struggles with the constant attention and the way people treat him like a curiosity rather than a person. He tries to return to his job driving trucks, but reporters follow him. His story gets retold and embellished until it bears very little resemblance to what actually happened. The man who achieved his dream of flying finds himself grounded by the weight of unwanted celebrity. Years pass, media attention fades, but Larry never quite shakes his brief time in the spotlight. He moves away from California, trying to escape the lawn chair Larry identity that follows him wherever he goes. Friends notice changes in him. The quiet satisfaction he felt immediately after his flight gets replaced by something darker. Depression settles over him like a rainy day. He confides to Carol that maybe it would have been better to have just stayed on the ground. It was one of their last conversations. They broke up not long after his flight, unable to bridge the gap between who he was before and who he became later. In 1993, 11 years after his famous flight, Larry Walters goes on a camping trip. But he never returns. The man who soared higher than anyone thought possible couldn't find a way to live with what came after. The news covered it as a footnote to his flying story, but for those who knew him, it reveals the hidden cost of dreams that come true in ways that we never expected. I'm here today thinking about Larry and what his story really means. On the surface, it's a tale of spectacular achievement, a man who built his own aircraft from lawn furniture and weather balloons. But underneath, it's a story about the gap between dreaming and achieving, between the moment of wonder and the lifetime of consequences that follow. Larry succeeded in ways that matter. For exactly 45 minutes on a July afternoon in 1982, he experienced pure flight. Not in a pressurized chamber like on a plane, but raw and immediate contact with the air, at an altitude not even birds know. He proved that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things with enough grit and determination. His flight inspired countless of others to pursue their own impossible dreams. But he also learned that achieving your greatest dream doesn't solve the problem of what to do with the rest of your life. Fame arrived, uninvited and unwanted. The simple man who wanted to fly found himself trapped in a story that grew larger than himself. The Federal Aviation Administration still uses Larry's case in training materials, but not as inspiration. They present it as an example of what not to do, how civilian aircraft can endanger commercial aviation and trigger expensive emergency responses. They're not wrong about the dangers. Larry's flight could have, maybe should have, ended in disaster. Commercial pilots had to alter their flight plans. Emergency services were deployed to save a man in a lawn chair. But focusing only on the violations misses something important about human nature and the need to reach beyond our ordinary limitations. Every year, someone attempts their own version of Larry's flight. Larry wannabes launched their own lawn chairs, hoping to recreate his achievement.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh my God!
Most fail before they leave the ground. A few succeed in brief flights that luckily end safely. They're all chasing something Larry understood, the fundamental human desire to slip the bonds of Earth and see the world from impossible heights. The deeper question isn't whether Larry's flight was dangerous or illegal. Of course it was. The question is what drives ordinary people to attempt extraordinary things, knowing the risk and accepting the consequences. Larry Walters looked at the sky every day for 33 years and felt the pull of something beyond his reach. When that pull became stronger than his fear, he acted. Not everyone will understand that choice. Most people live safely within the boundaries of what's possible. And there is a lot of wisdom in that. But some people carry dreams that demand expression, regardless of the risk. Larry's story reminds us that those dreams have power, that they can lift us higher than we ever thought possible. They can also destroy us if we're not prepared for what we find when we reach those heights. On July 2nd, 1982, for exactly 45 minutes, a truck driver from San Pedro achieved perfect flight. Just a man in a chair floating 3 miles above the earth in a state between fear and ecstasy. That moment demanded its toll, and Larry paid happily. Sometimes the most important stories aren't about the people who played safe. They're about people who risk everything to touch something impossible, even when they know the cost might be more than they can afford. Larry flew, and for those 45 minutes, he was God. Thanks for watching. I'm Henry, and this was What Now?